Why are relationships so hard, and what can you actually do about that? In this video, I'm going to be talking about the cultural and societal issues that are creating major relationship problems and pressures and making relationships so difficult. Also, individual aspects of how we can make our own relationships very difficult, and then what you can actually do about that as an individual within your own relationship to have happier, healthier, more enjoyable, more sustainable, fulfilling, and really, really great relationships. So, first, culturally, I believe, and societally, our relationships are like eroding, getting worse and worse. And you can see how divorce rates are proof of that. And there's so many horrible statistics out there that our relationships aren't doing well. And it looks like, to me, that our relationships are only getting worse. So in our culture now, I'm talking from the Western perspective from Australia, it's become really normalized to get a divorce and to just break up because we can always find someone else. Relationships have become pretty transactional and very easy to, pick something up, online on these dating apps, lots of different things. There's less and less meaning that comes within a relationship. So culturally, we're already being kind of conditioned to think that it's not a big deal. We can break up so easily, and that's one big factor. And another huge thing for, especially for men, is the conditioning that porn has created for men to have multiple, essentially like the fantasy that porn is conditioning and brainwashing even women, but mainly obviously it's targeted for men. That's this multiple successful one night stands, and it's someone you don't really know, someone you've never really met, and that's what the porn story is. So we're being conditioned. This is what an intimate or intimacy is. It's a lot more rare to see like long-term, relationship porn. So at a very young age, we're being conditioned to have the idea that multiple partners is what is successful, and which creates and feeds back into that notion of like, oh, it's okay, I can just, get another one, for example. So again, the quality and the intimacy and the like the sacredness of a relationship and intimacy within the relationship is eroding as well, because porn's playing a huge part in that, and like just in the background, how especially young men are being conditioned to see relationships, to see intimacy as this transactional thing that is easy, which it's not, obviously. And if if you're single and trying to find a good partner that's going to be a fit for you, it's not easy. It's literally a lie that it's just this successful thing that just happens quickly, and then there's heaps of chemistry, heaps of intimacy in a one night stand. It's literally like all lies. And so many things are built up to make that fake. And these are the things that are conditioning us culturally, that we bring into our relationships. Another huge cultural thing is social media portraying a happy couple, or the happy single lifestyle at the same time. So we only see the best parts of a couple's life, all the highlight reels, as you know. And this is playing into our mind that we relationship should be easy, and the relationship should be successful all the time, and we should be happy, most of the time within our relationships. And it's conditioning us to be aware and try and run away from red flags and issues. And there's a huge, red flag culture that specifically in social media is now actually talking about being aware of red flags and all these different things, which it's obviously important to be aware of, but we're now avoiding challenges in a relationship, and we're now conditioned to see an issue or a trait in someone else that maybe triggers us or that we don't like as a reason and excuse to not be compatible and just to, give up. We're not seeing these things as normal challenges that a relationship is destined to experience and to go through. Say, for example, you're in a relationship, maybe like 1 or 2 years in, you're past the honeymoon phase, and there's lots of things like multiple arguments. You're starting to see patterns that you're having with your partner, and you're having the same kind of issues, the same kind of arguments, and you're noticing that they're triggering you in certain ways and you're triggering them in certain ways. And then we think, because of all this conditioning, that it's so easy to find another partner, that it's transactional, and if we have issues, then it's something I should avoid. This person's toxic, he's a narcissist, whatever it is, whatever the new label is that we just give to that person, which is an excuse not to actually work on the problems that we're actually in. Now, this is giving a big caveat here. Whenever I'm talking about relationships, I'm not saying to stay in a very violent or toxic, abusive relationship. But if you're in this scenario, if you're already in a relationship for 1, 2, multiple, more than years, or if you're past the honeymoon and you're noticing these patterns that keep reoccurring, which happen in every relationship, then you're already together. You've already chosen this person. You already see something in them, multiple things in them that you love and that you like spending time with them. But then there's these issues that are coming. So we can't just say, oh, they were toxic. Well, why are you with them right now? What made you attracted to them in the first place? You wouldn't be with them, even if you are with them now, if they were just completely toxic or narcissistic. And we can say, I can hear people say, yeah, but I didn't know him or her. Like, she hid those parts of her or him from me, and I didn't know until this and this and this and this happened. But we're attracting, I always believe there's a rule that we will attract the person that we deserve in that moment. Not to say that if there's, any kind of harmful behavior or abuse or anything, not to say that you deserve that. But in the first place, we are attracted to people we're attracted to. And there's reasons for that. There's unconscious conditioning playing always in the background that program us to be attracted to certain people. So that happens, and we're always going to attract someone that's on a similar consciousness level than us. If they're on a different level or a more of an unconscious level, you just won't connect with that person, and it'll be very obvious. The people we do connect with, it might be on the opposite scale of consciousness, but we're still attracting the same level. So whenever we come together in a relationship, that person is most likely going to be on a similar level than you, and you've got similar stuff to work through. If they're bad at communicating, it's the opposite mirror response for you to learn how to meet those needs for you. For example, we're always going to be on the opposite poles. Someone might be more self-focused or selfish or narcissistic, and another person is going to be more codependent, more others-focused. So they're two different lessons, but we're still on the same level of consciousness, and we can both learn and grow together and become less selfish and become less others focused and people pleasing as we grow and learn together to meet our own needs and to be empathetic and meet others' needs and check in to see what that is. So what I'm saying is we have to fight against this conditioning. Our culture has been telling us that relationships should be easy and should be a walk in the park, and if it isn't, they're not the right person for you, which I personally believe is a lie. I don't think, from my experience, that there is a perfect person for you or the one out there where it's just going to be so easy. No matter what, it's going to bring up our shit, our issues, our baggage, our hurt and our pain, and it's going to be shown up in our relationship, which leads me to more focusing on the individual aspect of things. There's the cultural, and it's always tied in. I'll tie it back into these other external cultural issues that we're facing, but now making it more individual. When there's a rule that I have, and I've learned from other people, that the closer we become within a relationship, doesn't have to be an intimate relationship, parents, siblings, friends, whatever. The closer we become within the relationship, the more likely it is going to expose hurt. It's going to expose our baggage. It's going to expose our conditioning, our patterns of behavior, and our burdens that we're still carrying. This pain from previous relationships maybe, or from our family. It's going to bring up this stuff. The closer we become, the more that's exposed, because the person is knowing you more and more intimately, and they get to see in, which that is intimacy. Like, into me see, into me you see, which is not just physical intimacy, it's being open, being vulnerable. And the more we are vulnerable is essentially means to wound. So we're opening ourselves up to the wound, and we're opening ourselves up to our wounds and kind of showing the other person, like, these are my wounds. And that's really hard. I think this is the number one reason why relationships are so hard, because it brings up our pain and we don't want to deal with it. We're also culturally conditioned not to deal with it. You might have been conditioned in your family to not deal with it, to not talk about it. And we've got all these different coping mechanisms to avoid dealing with it, because it hurts, it sucks, feeling the pain and the baggage and the burdens that we've got. When we don't have, it leads to my second point, when we don't have a structure and a framework to deal with, work on, heal and process our burdens, our hurt and our pain, it's like impossible to deal with. And if we don't have the support, so it's the framework that we could use on ourselves to support ourselves, and it's also the external support. So also if our partner doesn't also have the framework, they could still support us, but it's like, well, but what do I do with this pain? Like, probably been in a relationship where you both have been triggered and you both might actually want to work on it, but it's like, what do I even do? I just feel so hurt right now, so abandoned, so lonely and isolated. When those pain, that burden is triggered, we just feel so hurt, so alone, maybe so fearful that they're gonna leave us. All of these different ways that we can really be hurt and triggered. within a relationship, and then our partners might even want to help us. We might have the support there, but it's like, what do I even do with this? How do I even think about this? How do I relate to it? It's usually just like so overwhelming that we have to then push it away, because it's like, what else? Am I just going to feel like this forever? You might relate to that. When we are fully triggered, it fully takes us over. It feels like if we kind of just accept this feeling, that it might literally last forever. And that is a terrifying thought. So we push it away, distract, numb, any coping mechanism to try and solve that pain. But there's amazing frameworks to place even the relationship and our own stuff, our own baggage, our own pain into a framework that makes sense. And it's like, oh God, I can so totally see even where I got that hurt from, how to think about it, how to support myself, I can support my partner when they get triggered. And it's not about me, which leads me to what I work with my clients. The framework that I use is internal family systems therapy, which is this beautiful, respectful, holistic, all-encompassing model that just makes sense. When you first read about it, hear about it, and start to understand it, it's like, oh, that makes perfect sense. I fully resonate with that. And I'm going to make a specific video explaining in detail IFS. There's some really great videos on YouTube at the moment, really great therapists and counselors that explain the model too. So go ahead if you want to learn more after this video. If you don't know anything about IFS, just check that out. But it's a beautiful framework, and I can give you just a bit of an example of how this would work. So let's say, for example, we're back in that situation where we're 2 years in, we're past the honeymoon phase, and we're noticing that the same triggers is happening. Let's say, just to make up an example at the moment, our partner, I'll use myself, let's use a real example. For me, in my family, I was the youngest of 4 in a pretty dysfunctional, family that was trying their best with some really stressful situations going on with my mum's health and lots of different things, finances and whatnot. And I wasn't able to fully express and be heard within that environment because the family just didn't have the capacity for it. So I just naturally knew, and through painful experience of not being heard, that it's not worth trying to be heard. So parts of me were shut down, and I had to develop a part of me that would unconsciously, but this part has a very conscious role. It took on this belief that I'm not worth hearing, and there's no point in trying to express my needs through all these experiences. And then that part of me, as an adult later on in a relationship, shows up and still has these beliefs, right? And still operates with the same ideas as I was when I was 10, whatever, back then. Same beliefs, like, because the internal family systems, there's all these parts, and these parts of us are kind of like a part of our mind that has a certain purpose, and it almost has like its own personality and its own identity and its own mind. This part, as you zoom in, it has beliefs about me, and it has its own experiences, and it might have its own painful memories from those experiences, and it has a belief that this part of me has this belief that it's not worth trying to communicate because there's no point. I'm not worth being heard. And that's tied to my worth of not being worthy, because a need, we all have needs and they all need to be met. If they're not met, why? It must be something wrong with me. There must be a reason why I'm not going to get that need met. So that's just one of these parts that I developed when I was in my family. Now it's showing up in my relationship. And when my partner does something that reminds me of not being heard, like ignoring me or just tuning out when I'm trying to like explain something quite vulnerable. It's okay if I'm just, talking and she's not listening. That's not a big deal. But if I'm really trying to share like something I'm trying to think about and it's a new idea I have, or it's just something that's really meaningful and that isn't heard, or she's just tuning out, then that's going to remind me of trying to be heard and not being heard within my family origin. So that's going to trigger all of those feelings, and then it's going to trigger even more feelings of unworthiness and pain and rejection, because that's what I experienced a lot in my family. So it's not only just in that moment of having that experience, but it's also times 10 of all the baggage and the burdens I'm still carrying from those years of not being heard. So then I'll get triggered, and then there might be a defensive, angry part of me that requires like justice and wants me to express to her how hurt I am. So it's not, there's all these different types of parts, and we'll go into the different types and the different categories, but this part that is angry it's a reactive part, and we're trying to then, we've become defensive after we've been hurt, we've been triggered, then there's a defensive part that kicks in that might say something that I don't mean, that she never listens or she never understands. And then what's going to happen for her? She's kind of oblivious, might be stressed about something, that's why she wasn't listening, and then sees that I'm reactive and frustrated, and this defensive part is kind of like potentially trying to hurt her and trying to tell and show her how hurt I am. Then that's going to trigger her own defensive part that also is a self-protective mechanism to be like, and whatever defensive result she could have, like, insert, I'm sure you have your own experience of what your partner might say back if they're defensive. They'll just defend themselves, right? And try and justify. And then when they justify, they're not being curious about your experience and why you're hurt. So that's even more frustrating. So you get more angry, and then she becomes more defensive and tries to justify more. And that's what, within IFS, it's called a parts war. And within our relationship, we're just two parts clashing heads. No one's curious. No one's actually trying to figure out what is going on for the person. So it's going nowhere. It's like two politicians with their own set fixed ideas, and none of them are actually listening. You're just talking at each other. And that's just a classic example. So how would we use that framework to help us within a relationship? As soon as I become triggered, we want to try and catch that trigger as soon as we can. We want to notice it and become conscious of it as soon as we can. And that could just be noticing how we feel. Obviously, it's going to be a feeling in our body when we are triggered, and that hurt, where I'm actually experiencing this hurt. It's like, oh, there it is. But we might not catch it straight away. We might go straight into defensiveness. That's cool. Whenever we can catch it, we can look, and so in IFS, they use the term a U-turn. So instead of projecting out the reason why I'm hurt and it's my partner, we do a U-turn and we become self-aware what my experience is. And we can communicate that after we get good at it. Once we get really good at communicating that, well, we've got to first be aware of it with internally, and then we can communicate it. So we can do a U-turn. Maybe that's just like, I need the bit of space, whatever it is, just to check. And we can be aware of that. I noticed, yeah, just my own internal, processing. I notice a part of me that has become like really angry, really defensive, and that was because I wasn't heard, and that's triggered, a lot of pain from not being heard in the past. And that makes sense, especially when it's explained like this. But in the moment, it's very hard to understand. But with the framework, with the model, it just puts everything into context. It makes it a lot easier to understand. So then we can communicate that, not in, I don't know about you, but I kind of cringe when I see a lot of like content on relationships when they're doing like role plays and they're just doing like therapist speak of like just this really robotic kind of, when you do this, my need for acceptance, and it's just, you know what I mean? It just doesn't fit. That's not how you would communicate within a relationship. We want to make it realistic and easy to say, and something that however everyone normally talks. So the best way to do it is, because we usually say, you like hurt me. So there's a you, and it's just a whole identity. You're just blaming the whole person. And then there's me, which is I am the hurt, right? So you can break that up. When we actually are communicating, we can say, a part of me got like really defensive when you weren't listening. And you can still say you, because it's something that they did. That's fine. I don't think we need to like dance around. Like I statements are good, but we don't need to dance around something that they've done, right? When you didn't listen to me, a part of me got really defensive because I think it triggered a lot of hurt in me when, like, it feels like another part of me feels like you don't care about what I'm saying. So there's two parts. The one that doesn't feel like she cares about what I have to say, which is that really younger one in my family. And then there's this older part of me that's the defensive, like, this needs to be fixed and this is unjustified. It needs to be, it's very you, which is a good thing, because we don't want to be hurt. And that's like trying to protect this younger part that does feel like he still is not worth hearing. So when we can say that and communicate that it's just a part of me, it's not all of me, I'm not the hurt, there's a small part of me that's carrying pain that was triggered by what you did. Does that make sense? It's a huge difference when we say and can recognize it's not who I am. It's a part of me that is carrying pain, which is the burden. I'm not the burden, I'm not the pain, I'm not unworthiness. It's a part of me that's carrying that from past experiences, and that was just triggered in that moment, and that's what's showing up for me. When you explain that, your partner is instantly can understand that, okay, sweet, like that's so much easier to process. And you can also go one step further and say, you can recognize parts in your partner, and she might be completely checked out and stressed. And then when she's stressed, she's focusing on how do I fix all of these different stressful issues that I have right now? And she's like, problem solving. So I'd be like, oh yeah, sorry, I was completely checked out. That can just be a really easy thing. But when we have these more complex, like ongoing issues where it's like um, parts are triggering parts and there's overlay, it gets more and more complicated. That would be a more like, sorry, I'm really sorry, and you could come close and all that stuff. But it does get more complicated when there's like ongoing patterns of behavior and your partner is almost like, it's still unconscious, but they're almost like trying to hurt you. And it's this parts kind of dynamic, which is a whole nother thing. And it's something we would obviously talk about within more of a detailed like counseling session. But this is just an example for you guys to understand how having a model, an amazing, beautiful, respectful, holistic model that doesn't make anyone out like they're the problem, that it's my favorite thing that I think is very, very, very effective. And if you can relate to that and it makes sense and it just really resonates to you, that you know that it's not us, just think about every issue that you think you have, a diagnosis. It's a part of you that is carrying a burden, and that burden part then has a maladaptive coping strategy to try and solve the problem of the burden. We have social anxiety, and that there's a part carrying pain that's fearful of something, whatever the experience was. And then we have this coping strategy to avoid being hurt. There's just two parts playing out our conditioning of what we experienced. It's not who you are. We can't be an emotion. We can't be a disorder. It's a behavior that makes sense when you understand it. When we understand our parts and why we had to take on that role in the first place, it makes complete sense. Like, if I haven't worked on my own stuff when it comes to being heard, and I haven't healed a lot of my pain in regards to that, I wouldn't be able to communicate properly. I was really bad at communicating like years ago. But through working on that for myself, learning how to actually hear and be there for myself and healing those burdens, it doesn't show up as much in my relationship. And I can just see that, like, oh, she's not listening. It has to be about her. It's not about me. It's not triggering anymore for me because I've dealt with that, or a lot of it. It's a lot less triggering. And I can instantly be curious for her to say, are you okay? Like, what's going on? You seem a bit absent. She's like, yeah, I'm really stressed. And it's not that I'm unworthy and I'm not worth hearing and the ideas that I have aren't important, which are all these like old beliefs that I did carry. They don't show up anymore, and it's not this huge issue anymore. And there's the beauty of doing our own work and that playing out beautifully within our relationships. And then relationships become so much easier because we have a framework to instantly use. And there's an idea again in IFS, which is trailheads. It's like the start of a pathway. Whenever we become triggered and a part shows up for us, it's an opportunity, it's a trailhead, it's the start of a path that we can learn more and more and more about ourselves and why we do what we do. And along that path is healing, to healing pain that we're still carrying from our experiences that show up and mess our relationships up and ruin them. And we get to the stage where it's like, I'm just broken, or they're just broken. And really, how can we have healthy relationships without having a model? And then there's, on top of all of these other cultural challenges that we're faced with, all this conditioning that we actually have to fight against, that I've had to fight against with all of those things that I mentioned. So I'm just really passionate about this stuff, as you can probably tell, and I hope you found this a little bit helpful. I want to make more specific detailed one about IFS if you're interested, but go ahead and check out. There's already some really great ones online. But if you could really resonate and you've made it this far in the video, thank you. If you're like, yes, 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 and yes, what can I do about it now though? You can book in a free consultation. I have a first session, we just do essentially like a meetup. We can do it online or face to face if you're in the Sunny Coast area. But we just check to see if we're a match. Obviously, if you're looking for counseling, you obviously need to be a good match, and that comes from you as well. So a lot of the time we're just paired up with a counselor and then we have a shit experience and it's like, oh, counseling doesn't work for me. If you've had that experience, it probably was because the counselor wasn't a right match for you. So have that first initial consultation, talk about what your goals are in counseling and what you want to work on, and then we go from there. But also, if you're a dude that really resonates with this and you want to kind of come to a space where other guys are sharing their experiences and just this really wholesome space where we can talk about this stuff, I'm running an online workshop type men's group every Tuesday, 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, and the first one's the 27th of October, and then it'll just be every month. So you can click the link in the description to find out more about that. Thanks, guys.